Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lindsey Burrell. We are joined by Denver Foote, mayoral candidate and community activist. Thank you for spending your Monday with us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So just to kind of get into some of the overarching questions we've been doing, what are your motivations for running for mayor?
I am running for mayor because I feel a huge urgency as a young person. I feel a huge urgency as a person of color. I feel a huge urgency for our LGBTQ community, and I feel a huge urgency for the most underserved communities in Iowa. And after the last statewide election, I knew that we needed to tackle policy locally so we can protect these communities.
Now, you're a community activist. Can you talk about the experience that you bring, some initiatives that you worked on that you think, if elected mayor, this kind of experience that would make you successful as the mayor of Des Moines?
Yeah, so I have organized with Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement on their climate justice team. I have helped organize the 24/7 carbon-free resolution that was passed here in Des Moines. I also have organized with the Iowa Abortion Access Fund. I helped lead the statewide response to the Roe v. Wade being overturned. I have organized with Des Moines People's Town Hall for the last 3 years, which organizes around holding city council accountable and dissecting the agendas to make them more transparent for everyday people.
Now, on your website, you say that policy should be for the people. Can you explain how your policy is more individual or community focused than maybe others?
I think me being a community activist and organizer and being somebody who's been on the front lines for years automatically makes my policy for the people, right? I built my platform around what I have heard through the years of organizing, and I've built my platform around my experiences growing up and understanding that my experiences are not singular.
And I'm glad you're talking about your experience. My next question was, on your website, you do speak about being a person of color and certain differences that you faced growing up because of this as mayor. How are you wanting to combat that or be a voice for those individuals here in Des Moines?
So it wasn't until I started community organizing that I realized my issues are not singular. I grew up in an immigrant family in a majority white community. I grew up some days going to school hungry and coming home hungry, and experiencing the experiences I had with a working poor family and being a person of color makes me different than the other candidates. And experiencing poverty at a young age really shapes you as an adult. And when I started organizing, I realized that these are not singular, and most people are not able to have the platform that I have to share their experiences and their stories, and that's what really powers me through.
So let's talk about some of the policy that you have. I've been pulling a lot of this from your website. One part of policy is transit. You say that this is a very important thing that Des Moines should be leaning into as more people are also leaning in and relying on it. Can you talk a little bit about what your vision for transit is here in Des Moines?
I feel like transit and accessibility is the backbone of a accessible community and city. So there are many issues like housing, climate change, our houseless community growing, and people moving to the metro. We need to be able to build infrastructure that can handle these. We need to understand that climate change is rapidly changing our climate, to say, and we need to stop relying on fossil fuels. The more we have electric DART buses, the more people have to less rely on cars, the less we have to build more parking garages, and the less we have to rely on parking. What I view is, as we change our roads and as we build this infrastructure, we need to stop just grading the top of the roads, taking it down, taking the first, like, I think it's 10 or 5 inches, and then just paving over it. We need to dig deeper than that. We need to build infrastructure that can handle these buses. We need to expand our walkability in the city, and we need to make our intersections safer. So I kind of said there's a lot of issues like housing, right? When we get people in housing, We need to make sure that they can get to work so they can pay their rent, right? We need to make sure that they can get to the grocery. A lot of people, when they get put in housing, and I have helped houseless folks get into housing, the biggest issue is getting around.
Yes, about to say that's the next point I was going to address. You want to address homelessness, houselessness, and create non-judgmental houseless centers. Can you talk about that in lieu of transportation, kind of combine just how you're wanting to help with this overall?
So I think our city relies heavily on nonprofit organizations to help our houseless communities, and they're overrun. We need to have more city houselessness centers, right, to help these people get back on their feet, to not just think of them as a number. I have personally gone down to camps and have delivered supplies, and I've heard their stories firsthand. A lot of them are afraid to go to these current centers that we have because of judgment and because of the barriers they face getting there, like transit. We need to have 24/7 heating and cooling centers for our houseless communities. We have libraries, and DART does offer free rides to these centers, but it's only as good as the libraries are open. During a huge winter storm we had 2 years ago, the libraries closed, and we had a houseless person freeze to death outside of a library. That should not happen. We should not have those deaths on our hands in the city when they are easily fixable.
Now, looking to other more needs-based assets for individuals, we've been covering here, DMARC and other food banks, they're hitting strides, not in great ways in the sense where DMARC just back in April saw a 12-month total of consecutive months of individuals that they're helping, topping numbers each month for 12 months. How would you also want to help on that kind of a needs basis for individuals?
I think building more of laying more groundwork for our communities that are relying on DMARC and these pantries. We need to view our food deserts that we have in the city, and we need to rely less on corporations like Hy-Vee to feed our communities. We need to rely less on corporations to feed our communities, and we need to rely more on individual people who are feeding their communities. We need to expand our community gardens, and we need to repair connections that we have with a lot of community gardens. We need to and if we focus more on small businesses feeding our communities, then we're putting more jobs into our communities.
So on your website, too, you have a safe haven for all. What does that mean to you, and what does that look like for you as mayor of Des Moines?
So there's a lot of things locally that the city can do right now, right? As suppression happens across the state of Iowa by the State House, and how the targeting on trans youth, on LGBTQ communities, on bodily autonomy continuously become more aggressive in America, I believe Des Moines can be a beacon of light in the city or in the state. We can say, you belong here in the state, you can grow here in the state, and you will be safe in the state. I believe that Des Moines should put out a statement that they are the city can put out a statement saying that we are a safe haven for trans youth. We need to build our connections with the school boards to protect our trans youth that are being targeted right now. I organize with a group called the Queer Youth Resource Center, and I actively work with trans youth in our public school systems, and I have heard their stories, and we need to make sure that their voices are being heard. We need to protect bodily autonomy by helping Planned Parenthood and helping current initiatives. And we need to protect our queer community by making more safe spaces for them that they can be.
You mentioned with helping with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and whatnot, community organizations that you helped organize. Another thing on your website was choice over one's body. You just briefly mentioned that if you would want to go further into that.
So when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I had just joined the Iowa Abortion Access Fund, and that was a huge whirlwind. Hearing stories of trauma that people have faced trying to access bodily autonomy in this state is not okay. There is a heavy reliance on mutual aid groups to help people access bodily autonomy in this state or being able to take them across state lines. And we need to do more locally to protect that. As somebody who could get pregnant, it's very scary, right? And these attacks on bodily autonomy are also gender-affirming care.
Switching gears, you've mentioned climate change. You want to help create green knobs. You talk about solar panels, planting initiatives for the city of Des Moines to help with these issues. Can you talk about that?
So if you live in Des Moines, you know that our water is not clean, right? That is a huge polluter in our city and in our state, and we live downstream. I believe we need to work with cities that are upstream to hold big ag accountable for the pollution in our waterways. As somebody who is Indigenous, I do believe in rematriating the land, and that includes community gardens, putting carbon back in the soil, revitalizing our prairies and wetlands, and I'm retrofitting homes as well to tackle to build infrastructure to tackle and help prevent when climate change happens. We've seen a heat wave this past summer, and maybe it's because I'm from northern Iowa, but I've never experienced a heat like that in Iowa before. And as somebody who is a renter and lives paycheck to paycheck, I live in the Drake neighborhood, and I remember my apartment being 89 degrees during the heat wave. If we had better insulation, my energy bill wouldn't be as high. And I know that my issue are not singular in this city, and I know so many renters were struggling during the heat wave, they struggle in the winter, and that just higher our energy bill. So we need to retrofit homes. We also need to build more solar panels, so creating more incentives to build solar panels locally. And then that would also help create more green jobs in the city. And other green jobs look like gardening, rematriating the land, helping retrofit homes, and putting education out there on what we can do to tackle climate change locally.
Switching gears again, another thing that was mentioned on your website is decriminalizing marijuana and working towards legalization. Now, we know that this is a state issue, but that a lot can be pushed in a more municipal level. Can you talk about your vision for that and how, as mayor, you would want to help push towards that legalization and how you kind of see it for Des Moines?
We need to decriminalize marijuana by making marijuana one of the lowest priorities in law enforcement. We need to create more incentives and pathways for people to access medicinal marijuana in the city. I think it was about 2 years ago, the city was kind of talking about decriminalizing marijuana citywide. And our police chief, Dana Winger, said that if it did happen, the local police force would not follow that rule. And they then decided to not move forward with that. And we need to remember that these people work for the city and it's not the other way around. And we really need city leadership that's going to stand up and fight for the rights of the people.
Looking into public safety overall, you mentioned on your website public policing, no more unmarked police cars, no more officers in pedestrian clothing. Can you kind of talk about that, and then also just what public safety looks like for you, what your vision is for public safety for Des Moines?
So I believe public safety should not be threatening. I believe that I see a police officer and I get on edge, even though I'm not doing anything illegal. And we need to create it more. It's called public safety for a reason, right? We need to make it more public. We need to not have these unmarked police cars because they're looking for problems. They're not trying to stop problems, right? Which it should be the other way around. They should be helping people get the care they need in a caring way. We need to really reimagine the de-escalation in the city. And having officers in plain clothes, just as having officers in unmarked cars, they are also looking for problems. They are not trying to solve problems. And I feel like that is a little bit redundant to what policing is supposed to look like.
Looking towards public safety more so just overall, can you kind of talk about, we've seen gun violence here in Des Moines. Can you talk about just more overarching public safety and how you would like to tackle these issues?
So creating education on why these folks feel the need to have violence. What are the root issues of these causes? And a lot of root issues is feeling stuck and feeling as if their future does not matter. I remember growing up and struggling with those same things because of growing up in a broken house. I never saw myself finishing beauty school. I never saw myself leaving my community, and I found myself falling into trouble. And I know that many people in the city are facing the same problems. If I had the accessibility to care and the accessibility to understand that I could do a lot, right? That I can succeed. It also really goes back to public school for me personally. I remember having a teacher, Miss Duesenberg. She would make like this after school program for me and my friends so we didn't have to go home right away. And she would drive me to my doctor's appointments, and she would take me out for breakfast and make sure I had food. And I owe a lot of credit to her to believe in me when I didn't feel that from my parents.
Looking overall, your website mentions that you're hoping for a change in leadership. Now, we know that there will be no incumbent this election season in November. Why should people vote for you?
I believe that I'm different than most people that are sitting on city council. I feel as if they don't represent me or the communities I come from. I feel that we need somebody that will stand up for these underserved communities that are not being represented on city council right now. I believe that me being a person of color, a queer person, non-binary, from an immigrant family, from a poor background, makes me different than the other candidates. I am not only here to represent the most underserved communities, I am actually part of the underserved communities. And that is what powers me through, is knowing that my issues are not singular, and I will really, truly be a person of the people, for the people, and not for corporations. I am the only person running a grassroots campaign, completely run on small dollar donations, volunteers in kitchens, and I feel extremely privileged to be here and have this platform to speak out on the things that I've experienced and the things that multiple people are experiencing.
Now, when you're talking to voters, what are you hearing from them? What are you hearing is top of mind for the individuals going into the polls in November?
A lot of it is the suppression that people are feeling by the state right now. They want to make sure that the person they're voting for is going to stand up for the most underserved communities. Another huge issue that I hear so much is about transit, especially in our younger communities, being able to get to and from work, being able to get to and from school, and being able to enjoy the nightlife in Des Moines and not have to worry about driving home. We need more late night transit.
Now, you mentioned another thing that sets you apart is being younger. Now, we just saw with a council member who was of a younger generation, Indira Shoemaker, and she just recently has now forfeited her seat on city council after 6 months of not going to any meetings and not actively participating. What would you say to people who say, okay, we had one young individual on city council and it didn't seem to work out? Of course, you should never judge a group by one individual person, but sometimes people have that mindset in their mind. What would you say to them about a younger generation and a new generation of leadership stepping up?
I can't and I won't compare myself to Indira. I believe that being a young person and being my own individual, I have different ideas. And we need young people to run for elected office. We need people like me and Indira where the system is not built for us to run. We need to have the voices and the experiences of our underserved communities, and we cannot just have one thing stop people from voting for the right candidate.
Now, this year will be a little bit different, and we've been asking everyone this kind of the winner takes all approach where the 50% of the majority vote is not needed for this. Do you have any opinions or thoughts on this kind of change on how this election will go in November?
I think it's a good change. It means that it's going to come down to every single vote. It means it's going to come down to every single door knocked, every single conversation, and every single voter. We've seen in the past a lot of city councils members that have been elected raise thousands of dollars. And here my campaign is we're running on maybe $200 a week, like we're really grassroots. And it gives somebody like me the chance to actually win and not feel like it's not hopeful.
Is there anything policy-wise, maybe something that I didn't ask that you say, hey, I want to talk about this?
I think that our city council needs to be more transparent with the budget. We need to put more education in the public. I remember when they were going over the 2023 budget, they had budget community meetings downtown specifically during the time for business folks that are taking lunch, right? They didn't go to neighborhoods like Riverbend. They didn't go to the South Side. They didn't go to these neighborhoods that are being underrepresented, right? And we need to make that more transparent. We need to have hybrid meetings so folks that can't show up to council meetings can participate virtually. And Iowa City does a great job of this. I was talking to a council member about it, and they said that they just don't have anyone that can handle that. And I feel like that would be an easy job to hire for. And if we made the budget more transparent, people would understand that the Des Moines Police Department makes up almost 40% of the budget, whereas things like the Human Rights and Civil Commission, which take on wage theft or mistreatment in the workplace for POC, makes under 1% of the budget, right? So we are continuously funding people who are looking for problems and underfunding people that are actually helping our communities.
Denver Foote community activist and mayoral candidate, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today and to do this interview.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course.